Hi, podcast listener. Welcome to Truth About Exits, a show dedicated to pulling back the curtain to reveal what it really takes to get deals closed. You'll hear directly from founders of companies who have raised capital, sold their companies, and even those who acquire other companies for growth. I'm your host, Coran. I'm a deal maker, advisor, and when I'm not closing deals, I love to talk to others about their deals and what it took to get them closed. And now you can listen into these conversations too. For all the show notes and more resources, go to truthaboutexits.com. And we're live. So today we have a very special guest on the show, my good friend, Mark Brenwall. And before I introduce Mark, I want to give a bit of context as to why you might be interested in listening to this episode. So usually, if a broker or an advisor is talking of someone selling their business, they'd love to interview them when the process goes perfect and they sell the business, which we've done some of these as well. Today, we're going to talk about the decision that Mark made to not sell his business after going through the sale process. So I'm really excited to dig into that. Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Happy to share.
Awesome. All right, mate. Just as a way of context, I thought it'd be cool for you to introduce yourself, maybe start with where you're based, because that's kind of interesting. And then if you could give us a little bit of background on why you moved to Thailand or why you left the US as well.
Sure. So before I left the US, which is 6 years ago now, 6 years and a handful of days, I lived in San Francisco for over 15 years. And while I was in San Francisco, I worked at a lot of different web agency style things. I was a front-end coder, and I got to see San Francisco during the early .com boom and also ride out the crash from the boom. And, just got in 17 years, you can imagine, got a really good feel for that city. And after being there for so long, at some point I just felt like it's a very expensive place to be. And if you're not really getting the most out of the city, going to all the coolest restaurants and the shows and, really capitalizing on the fact that you're in that town, then, it's really just ends up being an expensive place to live. And I'd done it all. Like I pretty much feel like I had completed my San Francisco journey. And so I decided to kind of test the waters and see, about this entrepreneurial lifestyle or this expat lifestyle. And so I moved to Nicaragua for a few months. My thinking was that, okay, it's foreign enough that I'll get the experience. It's also, a 4-hour flight back to San Francisco if I decide it's not for me. And I liked it. And so then I came back to my loft in San Francisco and I started to do some cleaning and selling some stuff and gearing up for the big move. And then I spent another 4 months, I think, in Boulder, Colorado, did some mountain biking, like that even more. Then I decided to come back to San Francisco and basically sell everything and move out. I moved to the Philippines first, didn't know a soul, kind of just sold everything and got a suitcase and hopped on a plane. And the first place I went to was Cebu, and I chose the Philippines because I had been to Southeast Asia several times and I really liked it, particularly Thailand and Vietnam, and never been to the Philippines. So I thought, well, I know they speak English there. So probably it's just like Thailand that speaks English, right? And of course it's not. No country is like any other country. And I quickly discovered that the Philippines just wasn't where I felt like I wanted to be based. But I got really lucky and I met some really great friends there. And, we're still really good friends today. They are also in the expat entrepreneurial space and, really started the foundation of the lifestyle I have now. In fact, the friends I met there even introduced me to my now wife, who's a Filipina. We've been married for 2 years. And when I had met her, I decided that I was going to stay in the Philippines long enough to see if the relationship had legs. And I told her, if it does work, then, just so you know, I don't want to live in the Philippines. And I said, let's try Chiang Mai, Thailand. Back then it was, just coming up as a place where expats were kind of basing themselves. Now that's all changed a lot in the last 5 years. It's booming with expats now. But I said, let's just try it out and, we'll stay there for 3 months and go somewhere else. And we never left. We've been here for 5 years now. And we absolutely love it here. It's a great place to be based. It's a great place to come home to. And also we spend several months a year other places, and we like that too.
Right. Yeah, and I think we met about 4 or 5 years ago in Chiang Mai, so it must have
That's
been
right.
fairly soon after you moved there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. Okay, well, that gives us a little bit of context on your background. So once you decided to take the leap, leave the US, and then move to Chiang Mai, how were you funding this? Were you using savings? Did you have any other business operations going on?
I had a bit of savings, and I say a bit, it wasn't a ton of savings when I left. Like I said, San Francisco was very expensive. And so I was lucky to scrape together about, I don't know, maybe a little less than 20K in what I'm calling like survival cash. Yes, I had some retirement funds, but the only liquid amount of money that I left with was about $18,000, which, funny, looking back now seems really risky, but at the time it felt like plenty. I had a small AdSense business, a couple of websites making, I don't know, back then probably like $2,500 to $3,000 in a month. And that was it, and I got to a place in the Philippines that I could afford, and I just got my hustle on. I found a couple consulting gigs that I could do remotely. I worked on those AdSense sites, and I just made it work.
Awesome. Yeah, sometimes it takes cutting the cord and you kind of figure it out, right? I love that.
It definitely feels like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, but it's kind of now looking back, of course, it's the best decision I ever made. And it's, I also know that I trusted in myself to be my own parachute, and I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, let's jump forward a little bit when you started your current brand. And we don't need to talk about the actual brand name. We'll keep that out of this story. I think the pieces of this story are actually more interesting. But one thing you did do that I really liked, and also the investors really liked that we were talking to, which we'll get to in a minute, was you created a brand serving one particular target market. And also, you didn't start with physical products selling on Amazon with this brand. So could you tell us a little bit about when you started the brand, why, and then the transition to selling on Amazon?
Sure. At some point, I could see the writing on the wall with the AdSense sites. To me, it wasn't a heartwarming business model. If I'm honest with myself, I was really just creating garbage on the internet, trying to trick search engines into sending me traffic and then hoping they click on ads to go away from my page, right? So that just isn't really a great business model. And so I thought, well, while these things are still working, I'm going to start to find some other revenue sources. And, again, this is now 5 years ago and a little more. I spent some time just building niche specific Facebook pages. So Facebook's changed a lot, but it's still a viable thing to do. And so I thought, well, let me just start like 5 or 6 different niches and see which ones I can build. And then the idea was to turn them into like affiliate marketing tools. And so I started some Facebook pages around things like, I don't remember completely all of them, but like tattoo artists and nursing students, and I don't remember all the other ones, but I stumbled on one that just really took off on Facebook. It's a niche that's very social and very engaged, and so Facebook was like the perfect place to start this brand idea. But really, the whole idea then was just to build this community and engage with them and get them to engage with each other, and then refer things like other physical products or maybe T-shirts or ebooks or training, that kind of stuff. And I started doing that, and it started doing pretty well. And I think some months I would make as much as $10,000, right?
That's awesome.
It's awesome. I don't know how sustainable it would have been if I didn't transition to physical products, but it was really a great way to test the market.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess building the audience first, because you'd been gaming the system with the AdSense sites, it kind of made it feel more like a real business. And then if we fast forward, some mutual friends of ours started Amazon, basically. So that's how you got into that. So yeah, could you talk a little bit about that? And then we'll jump into why you were wanting to sell.
Sure. So after we moved to Chiang Mai, I met some people here that had started selling on Amazon. At that time we're pretty small sellers, but he's like, one of my friends, Ben, specifically said, "Hey, you should think about selling a product." And I always considered it, but it just seems like such a big leap. Like, how am I going to make a product and sell it to anybody? And so he just trained, kind of walked me through the whole Amazon ecosystem. And it took a long time, and I took a lot of faith and a lot of risk, thinking back like, oh, I'm going to talk to someone in China and I'm going to source a product and somehow get it to Amazon. Seems crazy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in hindsight, China's so close. I was in Chiang Mai 2 years ago now, and flew up to speak at a conference in Shenzhen, and it was like a 3-hour flight. So it's like, it's right there. But yeah, it still seems like such a big leap if you've not done it before, right?
It's so close, but it is a very, very different culture, right? So I think it's the cultural leap that just seems almost insurmountable. Like, how does this work? And to be honest with you, like, you just, if I was going to recommend that anybody do this, it's like, you just have to keep facing the problem and then surmounting the problem, like, oh, how do I find a sourcing person? Well, get online, start looking for sourcing people in China and talk to a few. And, then, we'll just keep walking down the path. And that's what I did. And luckily there's a bunch of people here in Chiang Mai that I could use as reference, because they've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. So fast forward 3-4 years, you've got a really nice business running. Your brand is hyper focused on one target market, so it makes it easy to find new products. You're part of this niche as well, so you get the clients, the customer. So it's chilling along, cruising along. You're making a nice living out of it. Why the thought on, or what was the catalyst to make you think I want to sell this business?
Yeah, well, lots of things really. I'm in the community of people that, selling your business is a bit of a feather in your cap. So there's a bit of ego there. That's one part of it, certainly. Also, the idea of, this sort of fantasy idea of retiring early is another part of it. What the reality of that is actually like is something we'll probably talk about in a minute. But the idea of it is really enticing. And then another big part of it, and probably a bigger part of it than I give it credit for, is fear. Right? Fear with anybody who's built a business that is somewhat successful is going to get to a point where they're afraid that everything is going to crumble. Right? So yes, whatever skills I have that got my business to this point, probably very different from the skills I need to keep growing my business further, or to even keep my business at this stasis for a long time. And so the idea is like, well, let me just sell it while things are good, take my money, and I don't know, move to a deserted island, right?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, a lot of our clients have similar reasons, but people usually aren't that honest with the public, or even, to be completely frank, to be that honest with themselves. Yeah. So to know that fear plays into a reason to sell your business is a real thing. I think we all need to acknowledge that. So, okay, cool. That makes sense. And what about the preparing for sale process? So I'd love to walk through how that looked for you. And in particular, I know you interviewed a lot of brokers and advisors in the space, and you obviously know a lot of people that have either built large businesses and or sold them in this space. So could you walk us through how that looked from your perspective?
Sure. So like you said, I'm in this community of people that have experience selling their business. So it was pretty easy for me to get some referrals of people who I should talk to. And I talked to anybody who was referred to me. So it was a quick email. Here's who I am, what I'm thinking about doing. Here's what my business looks like at a high level. Would you like to talk about it? And so I talked to probably something like 7 to 10 different agencies or brokers, some big, some one-man shops, and just wanted to get a feel for, what was the onboarding process like? What kind of personality does the broker have that I'm talking to? Do they even respond? How fast do they respond? Just kind of get a feel for who it is that, fits my personality and somebody I would like to work with. Mm-hmm. And just kept knowing that down.
Sort of questions.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
sorry,
question.
go ahead, man.
No, it's just like then I would, have that first conversation, and then I just kept narrowing it down. Some people just didn't respond. Some people found out I lived in Thailand and couldn't make a time work, and so those decisions were easy to cut those people out. But when I really wanted to just make that decision, honestly, it was like a gut feeling. Like, do I trust this person? What size of businesses does he work with? How big of sales does he usually do? How many clients does he work with at the same time? Those kind of questions. How many deals does he make in a year? But even though I would ask those questions, honestly, if it got right down to it, it was just like, do I like this person? Do I feel like he's going to work for my best interest? Right.
For sure. Awesome. Yes. Would you recommend people do, it probably sounds obvious, but would you recommend if someone's looking to sell their business to go through a process like you did and talk to as many people as possible?
I absolutely would. And what's really interesting too is, people would say well, I think your business is worth this. The deviance in numbers was quite shocking. Someone would say, I think your business is worth 600,000. Someone else would say, I think your business is worth $1.5 million. And I'm like, that's just crazy. First of all, that it's so widely different. But then, as I went through the process, I've learned a lot about how brokers work. Some brokers will give you a high number and then list your product and your business. And then, knowing that it probably won't sell for what they listed at and just kind of wear you down to a point where you're going to sell. So even if you talk to several different brokers and, one's like, I think your business is worth $10 million. Don't just go with that person, dig a little deeper and find out okay, well, generally when you list a business, how often does it actually sell for that list price? Ask those kind of questions.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great idea. And getting context and perspective is always a good thing when it comes to selling an asset that, you've spent years building. You've had sleepless nights. It's your baby. So awesome. Okay, so luckily you chose us, which was awesome. Yes. And we worked through the sale process. So let's fast forward to when we actually had the business listed for sale. We started getting some interest and started talking to buyers. So once we actually started getting on calls with buyers that were picking your business apart, because there's a lot of businesses for sale, what was that process like, the first few calls and first interests that we got in the business?
It is, to me, it was pretty fun to do because I feel pretty good about the business that I built and pretty proud of it. So it was kind of like a platform to just brag a little bit. I was happy. And I also felt very good about the value that this business would be to the right buyer. I wasn't trying to sell something that I hope they wouldn't find the leaky tire in. I really believed it was a good business. So I felt like I had a lot to say, and I also really take this business seriously. And so I pretty much had an answer for everything they would ask me. Right. And so, overall, I thought it was an interesting experience and it was kind of fun to meet all these different buyers and find out what their objectives were and if we had a way to meet in the middle somehow. And
we did meet a real cross-section of buyers. Your business appealed to a really wide range of buyer and investor, from private people that are just looking to, maybe they've got a corporate gig they're working at and they're looking to replace that income, and how the questions they were asking and the interest they had, right through to really strategic, high-level people. Now, we managed to get quite a few offers for the business. Right at the end, we got an offer that when we first spoke, you said, look, this is what I need. In my mind, it was pretty much a perfect offer. So after going through all of those calls, how did you make the decision to say, look, I'm not selling this business?
Sure. So this is a story I've told a million times. So the way that it broke down was, we basically got two offers at the end. And there was the one before the last one was very close to what I asked for. So assuming that all the numbers worked out, went through due diligence and the offer still stayed the same. And, he actually ended up paying all of the earnout that was suggested. I would have walked away with the number that I wanted in the beginning. And so I took that number and I looked at it really this, but see, this is the first time in my life that I've actually looked at, what you call deal structure. I sell products on Amazon, so I don't know what deal structure really means. And for those people that don't know what deal structure means, it basically means, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it basically means like, here are the components of this offer. And those could be anything from like, here's the money that I want to put down. Here's the terms that I want. They could be anything. Assuming the business does well, I'll give you this. If the business doesn't do well, I'll give you that. I'll pay for your inventory over time or upfront. There's a lot of bits and pieces to a deal. And I talked to a couple other friends of mine who had sold businesses about this offer. And, they very quickly found some flaws in it, or not necessarily flaws, but things I didn't think about. Like, for instance, Mark, not a lot of times, but it's not uncommon for people not to get paid their earnout, right? So an earnout is, Mark, I'll pay you $1 million today, and then all the profit that I earn for the next 3 years will go back to you, or some portion of the profit or whatever, until you're fully paid out. And so, there was some concern over, did this operator have the chops to continue to run my business well? And, what assurances did I have that I would actually earn the earnout, right? And the more that I talked about this with people, the more I started to feel very uncomfortable with the offer as it stood. And so I talked to you, Coran, and we just, kind of put together a counter offer, which the guy ended up not really agreeing with. And all of this was just like, there was a lot of timing involved here, because as soon as a lot of emotions too, like the emotion of like, oh, we got the offer. And I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, we got the offer. We got the number that we looking for. So we're very excited. And then, digging a little deeper, scratching under the surface a little bit. Oh, you know what? Maybe the deal isn't really enough or exactly what I'm looking for. There's too much risk involved in the offer. And so then I continued to talk to my wife, and we decided that, you know what? Of all the offers we got, and we got several offers on the business, some of them were things we didn't really even think were real offers, up to this one that we got, which was an offer. It was a good offer, but still none of them to us felt like this was what the business to me was worth, right? And so then I talked to you, Coran, and I said, you know what? Let's take it off the market for now. Let me work on it a little more so I can build it a little bigger, so that we will for sure get the number that I want. And, the two of us talked, and you agreed, yeah, Mark, let's do that. That's great. Meanwhile, while this was happening, there was still one offer kind of out in the offer universe that we just hadn't heard back from. And so when we did, by the time we heard back from the last offer, I had already in my mind decided that I wasn't going to sell. And I know that sounds really wishy-washy, but selling your business is super duper emotional. You decide, okay, we're going to sell our business, and you go through that whole process. And then to say, you know what, we're not getting the offer that we want. And then to say, no, okay, now we're 100% going to take the business back. And then to have the final offer come back that was everything I asked for completely. If that offer would have come 2 weeks sooner, I would have sold. But it was just like such an emotional thing for us to go from selling 100% to not selling to 100%. And really, in that time when we decided not to sell, we got really excited about the business and things we could do, and just kind of fell in love with the business again. And then that's why we decided ultimately to just pass on the offer.
Yeah, for sure, which isn't an easy thing to do, because, yeah, like you said, you went through that whole emotional roller coaster of, I guess, even in the beginning when you first list the business, there's always some doubt of whether you'll even get interest, how people will value the business. And, along the way, I'll just speak to deal structure a little bit, because I think that was something that definitely played a role in this. So the investors that we were talking to, the buyers that we were talking to, were providing some pretty pointed feedback on your business. And, I was definitely, and still am, a fan of the brand that you've built and the business that you've built. I feel like the market needed to pay a premium for this. And I said to you in the beginning, if we're not getting interest, let's take it off the market. Are you 100% sure you want to sell this? Because I felt we were probably going out too early to really get you the value that I feel the business needed or deserved, basically, with what you'd put in. So we started getting feedback from investors about different pieces of the business, and some of the initial offers we were getting before those final two were, you mentioned inventory. So one of the deals was just horrible. We always present offers, of course. So if there's an offer that comes in, we'll talk about it, let our clients know. So I had to tell you about this deal, but I knew you wouldn't take it. Essentially, the offer, and allegedly this buyer, they're very active in the space. Allegedly, they've got deals across like this before. The way the deal broke down, you were essentially going to get paid for inventory at close only, and then a 3-year earnout to get you to your multiple that you're wanting. The business had to still perform, and you weren't operating. So once you, as a seller, once you release control of the business, anything that's performance-based, you really need to question what's actually going to be part of that deal. And I got a little bit upset on the call with the buyer and said, would you accept this offer? And they said, well, look, people have accepted these offers. So, I said, fine, well, I'll present it, but there's no way my client's taking this. And then we saw, so performance-based earnouts are one thing. There's quite common right now is seller financing, and I'll do other episodes all on this. And then you've got just holdbacks, where there's a portion of cash that's held back for a period of time, which is quite common. But yeah, when you talk to friends and they say, look, I sold my business for 4x or whatever the list price was, if you can, ask them what the deal structure was. That's, in my business, that's all I'm interested in, is what the deal structure was, how did it break down, and what was the result? That's really important. So yeah, it's good that you mentioned the deal structure.
One of which I was surprised about, but I mean, after time, I realized that, anybody can make any kind of offer. So I don't even know why I'm surprised, but there was one person who wanted me to stay on so basically, I think it was, Mark, I want you to work full time for us for 6 months with an option for us to continue having you work full time for a year. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you got to be kidding. Like, who would ever take that kind of offer? I mean, this is what you're going to learn. This is what anybody new is going to learn when they decide to sell their business. There's a lot of different kind of offers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the thing, is understanding or talking through the potential options and coming up with a game plan before going to market can make it easy to filter out what offers, and also from our perspective as advisors going out to market, is who should we target with this deal? Which of the buyers we're talking to already are the best fit on the deal? And sometimes, staying in the deal and getting access to capital and expanding, maybe help them acquire other brands. There's a lot of buyers in that space right now. That could be interesting. But like you said, when that deal came in, you don't work full time now. Exactly. So why would you work full time for?
Yeah, like what exactly does full time mean to you, my friend?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So that was I got to be honest, it was an emotional roller coaster on my side too at that point in time. But, 100%, you're a mate of mine, and I really, it was tough at the time, but I agree, I think the short answer is we went out a little too early and we were punching above where the market was. And yeah, that was the case. So that was a good learning on both sides. So during the process, you touched on this a little bit, but a lot of the buyer interest we had, we're seeing, obviously they pointed out some of the flaws in the business, but the vast majority saw this as a brand that was, you've done a good job building the brand, and here's what we would do after acquisition, or here's what we wish you had have done. So right now that you've taken the foot off the pedal on selling, what are you focusing on with the business now, and how does your day-to-day change right now?
So that's a good question. I mean, when I decided to take the business back, again, still a pretty emotional time. Like, I have to be honest with you, like, I still don't know if I made the right decision. Like, there's some days I'm like, man, maybe I should have taken that offer, but that ship has sailed. So, I decided, okay, let me double down on this Amazon business. And even that decision has changed a little bit over the short amount of time that the deal came off the the market. What we heard a lot from buyers was something like, Mark, if your business was doing 25% off of Amazon, it'd be much more valuable to us. Which means, in my case, I have a Shopify store. Could I and should I spend my time and effort building up my brand to be off of Amazon? This is what buyers said they wanted. Easier said than done. I'm right now like 96% Amazon. I'm glad I built the brand that I have, but that doesn't mean I know how to necessarily drive traffic to Shopify, get them to convert, get them to come back to the site. There's a lot more to having your own e-com channel than, just opening a Shopify store. So what I've really been focused on in the last, month or so is optimizing my business. So instead of, thinking about new products I want to launch and, really grow, I want to optimize, which means I have my sourcing agent in China looking for other factories that make the same product, either the same or and hopefully even better at a much lower cost. Also working on optimizing my paid ad spend, really focusing on how do I squeeze the business that I've got to just be much more of a profit generating machine. And the reason why I kind of want to do that now is I really want to, one of the great things, the ideas behind selling your business is you're going to walk away with a big lump sum of cash. An Amazon business generally isn't, if you're doing your Amazon business right, you're probably not taking a lot of cash home at the end of the day because it's a very cash intensive business. If you have a few successful products and you launch a few more, it just all eats up all your cash and future inventory. And so now I want to take some of that cash that I would have gotten from the sale and just stick it away in the bank and not think about it. So, maybe if I do that for the next 6 to 8 months, I'll have a nice, tidy nest egg and feel, much more secure and get some of the benefits that I would have had if I would have sold. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it's something that is a legitimate second option to selling. You mentioned at the top of the show or when we first started about the fear side of things. Cash in the bank and some more runway can definitely help with that. Diversifying outside of your business can also help with that. Yeah, that's a great plan. I think that's awesome. And any thoughts yet on whether you'd want to sell this business in the future, or are you, for right now, just happy to keep optimizing and taking the cash flow?
I definitely think I would sell it in the future. It's going to be interesting to see how much can I manage to, grow the profit margin of this business and at the same time decrease the amount of time I put into it. If I can really do that, where I start to see, let's say a 20% uptick in the profit margin that I take home, the money that goes into my bank account, and I'm working less and less every day, then potentially no. Then potentially if I see that as a realistic option, then why not just keep it as a cash generating machine? Certainly there's always the fear, you're playing in someone else's playground, you're working off of Amazon's platform, they can make changes and they will, and you're going to deal with it. But if I can hold on to this business long enough to take home the amount of money that I would have made in the sale and still have the business, that's a huge win for me. And that's kind of, at this point, I need to do that to prove to myself that I made the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that a lot of people don't think. They think it's binary. It's either you sell or you don't sell. But one of the biggest problems after an exit is what do you do with the cash? Totally. A pile of cash sitting in the bank is nice at first, but once it starts depleting, unless you have another cash flow source or income coming in, there's a difference between income flowing into your bank and a bunch of money in the bank depleting. There's no matter how much that amount is, I believe, it will always feel different if it's money coming in. So you definitely want to start looking at where to deploy that money and even start before you're thinking about exiting. Start playing with different income producing assets and figure out how to do that. Oftentimes people do go sell the business and then turn around and say, shit, how do I generate income out of this money, right? So it's a smart play to start looking at that before exiting, even if you're not looking to exit. I think this was a really interesting conversation. Thanks so much for jumping on the call here and taking us through this emotional roller coaster we've both been on. Is is there anything else you'd like to? So typically, if we're talking to someone thinking about selling, I think is the main target for this particular episode. So if you were advising a friend and they said, "Mark, you went through the process and you decided not to sell," what advice would you give them, and what perspective would you? Or do you have questions that you would say to someone, look, think about both sides, selling and not selling? And what sort of advice would you give to someone else?
I mean, here's the thing. Everything you just said about, planning your exit before you make it, figure out what you're going to do with the money, figure out maybe some side hustles to get some cash generating outside of the business that you're going to sell. I agree with all of that. And, our mutual friend, Dan, wrote a book called Before the Exit that walks through that, step by step and makes it very clear. And I'll say this, because I read the book before I decided to sell. And, he definitely in that book makes a case for not selling. And in theory, I understood what he said, but I still wanted a big chunk of cash to take home, right? And so I went ahead and said, no, I'm going to sell this business, Coran, let's do it. And it was only after I went through the emotional roller coaster, which he talks about in the book. Like, I went through everything that he talks about in the book. So I read the book again after I decided not to sell, and it made a whole lot more sense to me because I just went through everything that he talked about. So even though the people are going to give advice, hey, do all these things, know what you're going to do with the money, know what you're going to do with your time, have a plan for how you're going to, start making more money again. Unless you are, super diligent about that stuff, like, it's just, unfortunately, I had to go through it. I had to go through that emotional roller coaster to understand all these things that you just talked about. And so if someone asked me like, hey, should I sell? I would walk through all these same questions that you just said. And I'd say, what are you going to do with your time? And, how are you going to make money? And if that person said, I just want the money, I just want a big stack of money, I would say, okay, I get it. But at some point, you're going to have to face these issues, Let's say you got that $1 million you're looking for. Now what? What are you going to do tomorrow? Well, I'm going to take some time off. I'm just going to go hiking. Okay, that's great for a month. Then what? Right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And you may actually find out I've been doing quite a bit of this personally at the moment, and it's easy to think that money is the answer or the thing that you need. What I've noticed myself with writing my own goals and assessing where things are at is, if you write down what you actually want to do with the cash, you realize, one, you probably don't need as much cash as you think, but also you can start doing a lot of this stuff already.
Totally.
So it's almost like you're kind of delaying these experiences for no reason. One of the things you and I were talking about was you wanting to go skiing around the world, and that you could do that right now.
Totally.
Totally. There's nothing stopping you from doing a ski trip, and maybe doing it consistently for a whole year would get either tiring or impact your business somehow. But it's essentially 80%, 90% of what you were thinking anyway. So I think it's a good thought process to go through. I've got friends, and we've got mutual friends on both sides of these camps. Keep the business generating, make wealth elsewhere as well, and also at some point have your business ready to sell. I think that's probably the one thing that I would advise someone like yourself that is in this position, is always keep an eye on what the value of the business could be. Make sure it's in a somewhat sellable position, because if you ever needed to sell the business, then that's an option for you. If you're, completely just squeezing all the cash out of it, it's declining over time, that's not going to be a sellable asset. So that's a choice as well. You could definitely do that, but always keep one eye on the value of the business. And, you've been through this process, so that'd be easy for you to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
And have both at the same time, basically. That's awesome.
I totally agree.
Cool. Well, Mark, I love that you were able to come on today and give your perspective. One thing I've always been impressed when we talk is how clear you are on what you want, what you don't want, and focusing just on that. And I think that's a really great skill set to have, and something that people often don't think about. So appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Truth About Exits. Now, whenever you're ready, here are 3 ways I can help you. If your company is doing between 10 to 50 million plus in revenue, and you want help to plan your perfect exit to achieve the highest value and best deal terms possible, or if you'd like advice on acquiring other companies to continue to grow your company, we can help. Go to truthaboutexits.com/consult. There you'll see a simple form to tell us a little bit more about you, your company, and your goals, and my team and I will take it from there. So go to truthaboutexits.com/consult. The second way I can help is become a guest on our show. If you've had a successful exit, you want to share your story, or if you're actively acquiring other businesses and want to share your criteria with our audience, go to truthaboutexits.com/guest. Let's connect, and I'd love to talk to you. The third way I can help you is one of my favorite things in the entire world is sharing the Truth About Exit stories with other entrepreneurs by speaking at events all over the world. So far, I've had the privilege of speaking at events in the US, Canada, UK, Spain, Germany, Ukraine, Czech Republic, over in Asia, China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and even Australia. If you would like me to speak at your next event, go to truthaboutexits.com/speaker and tell me a little bit more about your event, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.